Okay, so now we're going to heat treat. The first two DVDs we did heat treating in the forge. Works great, but we're going to use the heat treating ovens this time. When you're doing large amounts of blades and stuff like that, you get a lot more consistency that way for your heat treating. And it saves you time too. So I've got my even heat here, which I use for ramping up for the quench, for hardening. And then I got my Paragon over here that I use for tempering. And then I still have my roasting pan that I use for heating up my oil and quenching. And I'm still using Parks 50 for my oil. So we can start heating this up. The other thing I discovered a long time ago, which I hate when you do all this work on a blade, especially when you grind all the flats and everything like that, you heat treat it. And you get scale buildup, and you have to go back and you have to sand all over again. I hate redundant work. So I discovered an anti-scaling powder that a friend of mine told me about. It's called PBC anti-scaling powder, and it comes from Rose Mill Company. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but this is the one I have. And this is good up to, there's two types, one for carbon steel, one for stainless. This one's good up to 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit. So the way we do this is I'm going to ramp my oven up to just over 600 degrees. So it's going to be 615, and it's going to hold it there for an hour. And then my quench temperature for the ball bearing material, the 5200, which is the majority of the material in this blade, and the more complex material, so that's the temperature we're going to go by, is 1521. And that's going to hold for an hour. So I'm starting that up. I'm going to put my blade in the oven so it warms up. So it's only going to take a few minutes for this oven to get up to 615. Now I'm going to leave the blade in there for about 10-15 minutes so the blade warms up. And then what I'm going to do is come over here where I've got my little container of anti-scaling powder, and I will sprinkle that onto the blade, and it will seal to the blade. It'll stick to the blade. I'll put the blade up and let the oven ramp up to full temperature for quenching, and then put the blade back in. And that powder will coat and completely seal and lock around that blade, prevent it from scaling up. The great thing about that is when I pull it out and quench it, most of that anti-scaling powder will crack off. The rest of it, if it doesn't, you could take it over to the spigot and just run it under hot water, and it'll just wash away. Give it 2-3 minutes of hot water, and it'll wash right off. And the great thing about that is then you could just take some 400 grit sandpaper and rub it real quick, and it's as shiny as when you put it into the oven. Saves you a ton of work, and saves you on belts as well. I bought that container, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, and I haven't used it all up yet. And as a tip, I like using this little system with the sifter and the container, because that way I'm not wasting it. I'm not throwing this stuff away, dumping it on the ground and such. So let's wait for this blade to heat up, and then we'll coat it. Okay, so our blade's been sitting in there at 615 degrees for about 10-15 minutes now. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the anti-scaling powder. I'm just going to pull it off, sprinkle it all over the blade evenly, and then put it aside and ramp up the oven to its full temperature. Do not breathe this stuff. I've been told it's the equivalent of roach powder. So I'm not going to be talking while I'm applying it. I'm going to be holding my breath. So see you in a second. All right, got good temperature on this. Okay, so I got a nice even coating all around the blade. Make sure you get the edge and the spine as well. You get a little bit of clustering up there, but it's not a lot. It's not too bad. I'll put a little bit more in the ricasso area, but I'm not worried about the tang because that's going to get sanded down and heated up again and everything. So now we got the anti-scaling powder on. I'm going to ramp up the oven and put this blade aside for now.